uh, pop-up that you will have to accept. So yeah, welcome to the Chicago Advocacy Call, everybody. We're glad to have you here. We're going to go through some updates on the latest on kind of two main campaign areas that we're focusing on: our Safe Streets for All work and our Save Transit work. So after that, we'll have time for any of you to share updates yourselves. If you do have a question as we're kind of discussing any of this, you can use the raise hand feature. You can drop a question in the chat. We want to make this kind of open-ended. We're a small group today, so we can really kind of, yeah, just converse. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with a couple of transit updates. So actually, last night was the budget hearing for the 2024 CTA budget. We have launched an action alert as of a couple days ago that's going to be live until this coming Tuesday. That kind of includes our messaging on what we want to see more of in the proposed budget and what we think the agency should be prioritizing. So Jim just pasted in the chat a link to our blog that kind of highlights our messaging, and then if somebody could also paste the direct link to the action alert too, that'd be great. We've had almost 700 people take action. And so this is sending kind of our priorities to the CTA board directly. So what our priorities include is really a focus on restoring service to pre-pandemic levels. So other cities like DC and Seattle have been able to restore their service levels to pre-pandemic levels, and we're kind of the only holdout. We know part of this is due to operator capacity, right? So we want to see CTA investing more, especially in training their rail operators. Right now, they're keeping class sizes pretty small. They're also only hosting a couple trainings a year. And then when people do start, they're starting in kind of part-time, lower wage work as what's known as flaggers, rather than kind of passing through to full-time work as operators. So these are the kinds of things that we want to see change in order to make the roles more desirable, and just more needs to be done with investing in frequent service. There's kind of this vicious cycle that happens when you have unreliable service that then leads to people getting frustrated and making other transportation choices if they are able to, right? Like, how many times have you guys seen somebody call a lift from a bus stop when, you know, there isn't a bus coming for like 20 minutes, right? Honestly, I've done it before, to be real. But not everyone can afford that, right? And so we need to make sure that CTA is being as transparent as possible with the service levels they're providing, and really putting all their resources to beefing up more frequent, reliable service. So that was kind of the bulk of the messaging. We also are pushing for more interagency collaboration. So equitable transit-oriented development is something that we've been kind of along with the housing community and the broader kind of transit community at large, have been pushing for. There was an ordinance that passed last year at this point called the Connecting Communities Ordinance that sets kind of parameters for where and how to build more kind of family-friendly housing that's affordable by both L stops and on some of the higher ridership bus routes. And so these are the kinds of ways we want to see the city investing holistically in both transit and housing. We also are calling, and that takes capacity internally at CTA, right, to be meeting with Department of Housing, to be meeting with Chicago Department of Transportation. And what we've heard time and time again is that they simply either don't have the staff, or the staff they do have is really overwhelmed and limited. So we want to see more staff capacity to be doing that kind of interagency collaboration. We've also seen that for the current mayoral administration, these two kind of more kind of community-based campaigns, both Bring Chicago Home and Treatment Not Trauma, are big priorities for the current administration. So Bring Chicago Home was started by housing activists to get more funding to build more affordable housing. It's calling for using the real estate transfer tax dollars to build more affordable housing. And so that passed through City Council this week and will go to a vote to Chicagoans on, I believe, the March 19th, 2024 ballot. And then Treatment Not Trauma was passed last year, and that is creating this task force and piloting a program where social workers will be responding to mental health crises rather than police officers. And so we think both of these campaigns, as they are priorities of the current administration, really tie into our transit advocacy work too, right? So the more people we can get living in affordable housing along transit lines, the higher ridership we'll have. And then with that, it just creates a better system for everybody. The more ridership, the more operating revenue the agencies have as well. So we also know, there's a lot of mental health crises and houseless folks on transit. And with this new pilot of having social workers do this kind of intervention, we want to see that happening on CTA as well, preferably as CTA employees, as transit ambassadors. That's something we've been pushing for a long time as well. Kind of CTA staff that's also trained in crisis intervention. So a lot of different priorities for the proposed budget, but chiefly being increasing service, increasing operator training and capacity, and then increasing capacity for collaboration between different city departments. So I will pause there. Does anyone have any questions about the proposed CTA budget or any of these different priorities we're calling for with the budget? Alrighty. Well, I will move on then. We also have been working and involved in a regional planning project called the Plan of Action for Regional Transit. So this has been a major priority this year. The Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, so that's like a pseudo-governmental body, has been studying and analyzing different funding sources for our region's transit system. So they're looking at the entire regional transit authority. So that includes Metra, PACE, Suburban Bus, and CTA. So due to the pandemic, when ridership took a hit, that meant that the agencies were really losing out on a lot of that operating revenue. So the money they use to then kind of run the buses and trains, right? And due to that backfall or that backlog, the federal government stepped in and provided federal support. That federal support will be running out by the end of 2025. And so it's time for to kind of step up and look at additional funding options to make sure that we don't have to down the road, be cutting service in half. We're already still operating at, I think it's 27% or 20% lower service than we had in 2019 pre-pandemic levels. So we need to make sure that transit is funded as robustly as possible. So with these recommendations made by CMAP, they're delivering that to the Illinois General Assembly by the end of this year. You can check out the link that Alex posted in the chat for all of the memos and analysis and details they've done, analyzing different new funding streams. But what we want to kind of prime you all for is that this upcoming state legislative session that will begin in January of this coming year, this will be a top priority of ours at the state level to be pushing for reforming how these agencies are funded, and even so far as how they are governed. So any questions right now about kind of those upcoming priorities at the state level, or ways to get involved there?
Sorry, my internet shows a fantastic time to cut out at the end of the budget. The last line item. I just wanted to ask how the budget hearing went last night.
Yeah, for sure. So there were, I want to say, like an hour and a half worth of comments at least. I think that one thing that stuck out to me at least was kind of the consistent messaging amongst all the activists and advocates that spoke up. I was glad to see there were folks from Better Street Chicago, from Commuters Take Action, from the Democratic Socialists of America, and everybody was calling for increased service and really using the funding that does exist to train up more operators, as well as running more consistent service on buses and trains. I think the messaging from the DSA folks was also kind of investing in the workforce means investing in riders as well. There were some comments around concerns with the private security guards, who don't really seem to be doing much based off the comments we've heard. I was really fascinated by one comment by a CTA employee who's a customer service assistant at a Pink Line station. And he said he's often seen these private security guards just kind of leaving the stations. And it's been difficult to get in contact with them in moments of crises. So he was asking for them to have walkie-talkies and to be kind of integrated into the communication networks of current CTA employees. And so that really underscores the need for these security guards or additional staff capacity to be keeping the system safe and just bringing more bodies and eyes to the system, and have them be integrated with CTA employees and not these kinds of private contractors. So that was just one thing that kind of interested me, but overall, it was really great to see so many voices calling for increased service, increased capacity. Robert, do you have something to add?
Yeah, just that customer service worker, I think, had the most revealing comments. Especially, I don't know how many people are frequent CTA riders. It sounds like that's one thing. A lot of people identify as bikers. I identify as a CTA rider, and always using their stations and observing things. And it's that was a real true revelation to me that they had no contact with the private security people, and the hate behaviors that people described. I've seen those too. And by using different stations over the years, I've noticed that different of those attendants take a different attitude towards their station, and even if the shifts change. And it would be nice if they had better training for them, gave them better support for their income, and just provide better accommodations overall. And especially part of that is you would think being able to communicate when that need arises, that you might need extra security or extra help or whatever that might be.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll also say the hearing started a little late. Several of the board members were stuck in traffic, ironically. So that was interesting as well. Yeah. Any other questions about the hearing last night, the CTA budget, call to action? Great. Well, the deadline for public comments, excuse me, for written public comments is Tuesday the 14th at 5 p.m. So we would really appreciate it if you all can just take a minute and share with your networks that action alert link. I think it would be great to have at least 1,000 folks take action. We're close to 700 now, so I think we can get 300 more by Tuesday evening. So please help spread the word. All right. And any other questions about state advocacy? We'll have kind of more clear asks. I'm sure there'll be plenty of action alerts down the line. But what we hear time and time again from our lobbyists who are down in Springfield is that these action alerts really do make a difference at the state level. There's also something called witness slips, which, we can discuss at a later date, but we always hear that when we are able to turn out some numbers in those kind of digital virtual ways to take action, it still makes an impact even without the kind of bodies in person. So just keep that in mind. It might not feel like you're making a huge difference, but it does add up. All righty. Well, without further questions, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Alex.
Thanks, Julia. And I will give an update on safe streets. So something that was recently passed by the city council was a new ordinance called the Fatal Crash Legacy Ordinance. And this is pretty much straightening requirements for the city's reporting on fatal crashes, something that we've seen arise over the years here in Chicago and the Chicagoland area. Is just the number of crashes that have been happening, especially fatal crashes to pedestrians and cyclists. So it's something that we keep track of here at Active Trans and are continuing to advocate for safer streets whenever a fatal crash does happen. And this is a ordinance that was spearheaded by the 50th other person, Deborah Silverstein. So she was the one who put it and introduced it to council, and it got passed recently. So it won't take into effect until the end of the year. And pretty much what it will do is it will require the Chicago Department of Transportation to develop a list of recommendations that are safety improvements that can be addressed whenever an identifying contribution factor is put on the report, and that way it could be used as a resource when it is put out for a resident or even an older person can kind of use it as a resource to identify a hotspot to advocate for safer street improvements, or even just kind of advocating for safer streets in your ward overall. So it is a resource that is going to be come in handy for advocates, for us who are on the streets or kind of know of people who have been on close calls or crashes, that can use this as a way to kind of use it as a resource as well. Another thing that will be for Active Trans is kind of just working with our members and supporters to monitor how the law is implemented. So making sure that the reports are being done when they are required to be done. And that is a good resource. There is no call to action with it since it's was just introduced and it hasn't really gone into effect later on. So it is something to keep an eye on. More of an update. And just with that, I do want to just bring a call to the recent crashes that we've had here in Chicago and just the recent weeks in itself. So in October, there was 3 fatal crashes to cyclists. One of them was a 16-year-old Josh in Portage Park. And then there was another one that actually happened on a bike lane, on the Damon bike lane in Andersonville. And then there was another one on the northwest edge of Chicago as well. And then with that, throughout the years, there's been 5 actual cyclist crashes and 25 pedestrian fatal crashes. So we've had 30 fatal crashes that have involved pedestrians and cyclists just in this year alone. So it's something that we want to keep advocating for, as crashes that are preventable should continue to have safe streets as crashes happen, and it's something that we at org and continue to push out to our supporters to be advocates as well too. Does anybody have any questions on the ordinance or any questions on safety or safe streets?
Thanks for joining us, Theo. We'll send out the recording of the meeting so you can hear the rest of the updates. And thanks for those updates, Alex. Robert, over to you. You've had an exciting week as well.
Yes, okay. I'm trying to follow our agenda here. I think you want me to talk about our experience in Springfield.
That's right.
Promoting the PART plan, which Julia made reference to, which is the plan of action for regional transit. And I think the links have already been posted in there. Audrey was with us as part of MPC, and we also had a strong showing from members of the environmental community through the agency, the Illinois Environmental Council. And we had over 20 members of the General Assembly from the House and the Senate, as well as some of their staffers come. We had several panels where we broke down the issue about what the transportation crisis is. Essentially, as Julia summarized, there's a crisis of the fiscal cliff. In other words, financial resources to support public transportation, and then the issue of governance. The current governmental system that we have, or governance system for the region, which is RTA and then CTA, PACE, and METRA, all having different roles and different boards, is a system that's been in place probably longer than many of you have been alive. It's actually been in place for about 40 years. And certainly things have changed since the 80s, and it's time to revisit that, along with looking at new ways to support public transportation other than the sources that we're utilizing now. And so many members of the General Assembly, as you can well assume, haven't been there. They're in their second or the third term, if that. A lot of newcomers. So we had a lot of education to do. We still have a lot more to do. Many aren't aware, and then we do have some champions that we've worked with to advance this cause, and we've done some webinars with the members of the General Assembly, and I think we had a really good session on Wednesday morning. It was sort of just a socializing type of event, but also educational in nature. I don't know if Audrey is still with us. I'm looking at my little notes here, so if she wanted to add something about that experience, I'll let her do so.
She logged off, Robert.
Oh, she left. Okay. All right. And then there will, as Julia mentioned, there'll be opportunities to do some further advocacy around the plan of action for regional transit. And we'll be looking to people who are on this call to join us as we begin to promote the legislation that will be put forth. right now, the General Assembly won't meet until January. They're doing what's called a veto session right now. They have a bunch of miscellaneous stuff, nothing really important from our end of things as transportation advocates. So we're expecting this is the time of year or the season when the legislators put together their potential bills and proposals, and we'll be working with the leadership to figure out what the sequence of legislation will be in order to begin this legislative conversation about the plan of action for regional transit. And since the General Assembly mandated that they wanted this plan to give them some options, now the ball sort of back in their court. And Senator Villalbaum has been the champion in the Senate. He leads the Senate Transportation Committee. And then State Representative Eva Dina Delgado has been a leader in the House. And in particular, she has a background of working with some of the transit agencies. So that's a added incentive. So if people have any other questions, I'm open to answering them.
And I just wanted to flag in the chat, we have two more links. So one is to share any interest you have in working with Robert to, as a constituent, meet with either your city alderperson or your at the state level state senator, state representative. So Robert will be organizing those constituent meetings. If you're unsure who your elected officials are, the second link also is a lookup tool. You just plug in your address and that'll show you who your elected officials are at all levels of government. So this is more of a longer term effort, but if you want to kind of level up your advocacy and your leadership, this would be a great opportunity to do so. So feel free to use those links, share those out as well. Alrighty. So I guess that transitions pretty well to talk about two upcoming opportunities to kind of get more involved. So as Jim mentioned in the chat, on Tuesday, November 28th, we're having our annual member meeting. So this is going to be at Revolution Brewing on Kedzie in the Avondale neighborhood. And it's free to attend, and we'll be getting into more about our goals for the upcoming state legislative session and ways to get involved. It's going to be a really, really important year at the state level for us in 2024. So kind of all effort is going to be kind of leading up to that. So we hope you can join us on November 28th. And then launching in the new year, we are going to be kind of relaunching rather our ambassador program. So I'm not sure if any of you ever went through that. I feel like Ethan, you may have been an ambassador with us previously. So this was kind of our advocacy volunteer program that has been on hiatus during kind of the pandemic, and we are relaunching with the rebrand of Street Team Advocates. And so we're going to be hosting some new trainings that will highlight our two main campaign priority areas, so Safe Streets for All and Safe Transit, and getting into the nitty-gritty and really building up your confidence in advocating around these two campaigns, and really getting into ways you can make a difference and get involved. So if you join us on November 28th for the member meeting, we're going to be announcing the street team advocate training dates then. And those dates will be in January and February of next year to begin with. And then we really want to hear from everyone, what kinds of future trainings, topics, and skill building is most useful, relevant, and of interest to you all. So we want to be kind of responsive to what the people want and are interested in. So yeah, so there's lots going on, and a lot of different ways to get involved, from low stakes, taking action on the CTA budget before Tuesday, and then you can up the ante, join us on November 28th, sign up for a street team advocate training, and then all the way up to meeting with elected officials with Robert. But we'll be with you every step of the way. So we look forward to being in this movement and in this work with you. Robert, over to you.
I forgot to add, I guess it's appropriate under upcoming things.
Mhm.
Active Transportation Alliance has been involved with a coalition called the Free to Move Coalition, which is alliance of community and advocacy organizations working to create a safer, more racially equitable system of traffic safety in Chicago. And Active Trans has been working with a group called the Impact for Equity. They used to be known as Business and Professional Interests, BPI. And we reached out to them, somewhat contemporaneously in the period of time after the George Floyd incident, along with a group called Equiticity, which works around transportation justice in Black and Brown communities. And several years ago, we published blogs and reposted some reporting that was done about ticketing Black and brown bicyclists on the south and west side, and the disproportionate amount of tickets and the lack of infrastructure. And then we also heard concerns about what are called pretextual stops. And so we, through public documents, looked at 17 years and like 42 billion records, and essentially saw that there was a lot of racial profiling going on with traffic stops, and that police make the argument that they're good for crime fighting and they're good for traffic safety. And the evidence from both shows that that's neither one of those assertions is true. So on Monday, we're doing a what's called a subject matter public hearing, where we're just presenting the findings that we've had about the traffic stops in the city, pretextual traffic stops, and just educating our aldermen about what the need for examining a change in policy. So I just posted the link to the Free to Move website. Also, if you have friends in your network who are Black or brown and have been stopped by the police, when you go to the Free to Move website, we have a link on the website there to something called Soapbox, and people can make a short recording of their experiences when they've been stopped by the police for minor traffic violations, when you believe that they're really on a fishing expedition. So there's a lot of information there at the Free to Move website, and invite you to explore it. We're doing the public hearing at 9:30 at the City Council chambers, and you're welcome to attend virtually or in person. So that's it.
Great. Thanks so much for those updates, Robert. So I want to give the opportunity if any of you have questions about really just about anything, anything we discussed today or anything else that's on your mind. Okay, we have a question from Laura. Read the fatal crash ordinance. It's a great step, but can't anything be done to identify and improve dangerous areas before there is a fatal crash? Great question, Laura. Alex, you want to take this one?
Yeah, thanks, Julia. Before, I mean, if you know it's kind of like a hotspot of crashes, I would kind of say the first thing is to reach out to your alderman and have your alderman be aware, because they're usually the main point of contact to reach out to the Department of Transportation, who will come in and actually kind of identify what could be done to improve it. But pretty much it would have kind of that would be the first two steps to get something done before the ordinance kind of takes into effect of having the city be required to make any recommendations.
Yeah. Also, just I'll chime in here too. For the city does have like an existing plan for all like the identified high crash corridors and intersections. And so they do have like what are the worst spots. And that analysis has been done, and they have plans on how to make those places safer. So they need money to do it. But this is the fatal crash, but fatal crashes happen in places all over the place that aren't necessarily like outliers or like the most dangerous thing. So this ordinance would add like another level of not even just looking at the most dangerous, but anywhere a fatal crash is taking place, and for drivers too. It's another thing that's a little bit different about this is it's also with motor vehicle fatalities. So it'll kind of build off of the work that's already happened, and hopefully, be a good resource for advocates in some of these places that haven't had the analysis done from the high crash work that CDOT's done.
Yeah, the other thing you might think of doing is just continuing talking with your aldermen. Many aldermen have what's called menu money. I thought there was one or two newcomers here on this call, and that's like a discretionary fund. Some aldermen make independent decisions of how to use that. Others consult the community, and frequently they do some infrastructure upgrades, but it's not enough money to be make a significant impact as big as wards are. And so one of the issues we found is that our agencies are somewhat understaffed, that they don't have enough. There's a lot of great projects sitting on the shelf, but the ability to implement those and move forward is constrained somewhat. So we're always advocating for, I guess, greater resources, less reliance on the menu funds. There's legislation. I think the ordinance went through, but we're working on when anytime a street is touched that they do resurfacing or those sorts of things, that they do improvements as they rebuild the street. So there's a lot of things going on that hopefully will begin to result in changes.
Thanks for that question, Laura. And then we have a comment from Liz that I'll read out loud. All that has been discussed today is absolutely critical. I'm also very interested in better understanding long-term planning, particularly around North DuSable Lakeshore Drive and traffic modeling done by CMAP. Active Transportation Alliance has been active around North DuSable Lakeshore Drive for a long time. I welcome other folks to chime in here, but just to respond at a super high level. Yes, we have been kind of at the table for the North Lakeshore Drive project for many years at this point. It's been slow moving, to say the least. But what remains to be an issue is that kind of the original purpose and need of the project makes it so that kind of moving individual vehicles and cars is as important as moving individuals on buses, bikes, etc. And so that's something that we and other advocates have been pushing for and discussing, is just taking it all the way back to the beginning and changing that purpose and need, which would kind of change the matrix, the decision-making matrix and priorities that the planners have been using to really guide all that modeling and kind of decision-making along the way. The other thing to note here is that all of this planning has been kind of unfunded in terms of implementation. And so all of this will be just, another study that sits on a shelf unless these things are actually funded. We've also attempted to organize, aldermen along the lakefront at various points in time, business leaders as well. And it's been difficult to kind of penetrate the planners who are leading this process. One kind of remaining target that has yet to be kind of fully activated around this could potentially be the governor, since this is a project kind of being co-led by the Illinois Department of Transportation. And so if the governor were to get involved, that would make a big impact as well. So Jim, you want to add some more there?
I was just gonna say, I know we're the NDLSD conversation is gonna probably kind of come to the fore again soon, because we're waiting for them to release like the preferred, like the recommended alternative, which is like what they're gonna build, and we're probably not gonna be happy about that. So to Julia's point, like there's gonna be probably another chance to make like a bigger stink about things. But also I just wanted to kind of like connect the dots between like this project and like some other things that we're working on the state level, because this is an example of, and to your point, Liz, about like the CMAP modeling and like how are we making decisions about transportation projects. We're getting ready on the state level to try and push for a greenhouse gas emissions rule, which would basically require any future transportation project plannings to take into account the greenhouse gas emissions that would be generated by that project, which would be a radical transformation in how we decide what types of transportation projects to fund. So that's going to be another place where, as like we're talking about in 2024, and a lot of things happening on the state level and people being ready to mobilize and meet with our state reps and state senators. An example of, hopefully we can go a little further upstream and make the policy change to make sure these bad projects don't even see the light of day down the road. So stay tuned for that, but we're excited about the possibility. Colorado just recently enacted a similar law, if you're interested in learning more.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think what I've been emailing the project team, and I also emailed CMAP, and it seems like with the traffic modeling, I mean, with the most recent piece that the project team put out in August, their assumptions with traffic are that people won't mode shift, even if we improve transit. And so they assume that people will stay in cars. And so they're like, well, that would be unfair to people living on Ashland, because everybody in cars who can't be on Lakeshore Drive will go to Ashland. But that's just not, I don't know. That's just would not be the case.
And it's also based on like the world before the pandemic, right? And like there's been a massive change in how people move around, and it's all just, this is like, like why we slam our heads against the wall.
Right. Yeah. And I think with we have these goals around reducing vehicle miles traveled in the Chicago Climate Action Plan, and there's CMAP goals. But then if we can't do anything on specific projects, like what are we doing here? So it sounds like that would be really great, the state legislation you're talking about.
So it's like trying to get around all that stuff because there's so many veto points right now, and CMAP is like overrepresented by like suburban interests, and so it for those of us who want to like like grow our urban core and have more dense, sustainable place to live. It's not really set up to make good decisions along that. That's why we're really pushing to have a big new campaign that's going to happen along with a lot of our environmental allies, which is exciting. So stay tuned there. Yeah, 2024 is really going to be lit.
Awesome, thank you.
And thanks for the your advocacy, Liz, and for the question and discussion. Yeah. Thank you for joining us today, Laura. Any other final thoughts, questions?
I just had a quick question about it's kind of a couple things, but is there any word on who might be the next CDOT commissioner? Is there anything interesting in the proposed budget for CDOT? I saw that like their in-house engineering and construction team is growing, but the actual like Safe Streets team isn't, or I'm not sure if I'm reading that right. Is there just kind of any updates on that side of things?
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot in the budget because there was such a big deficit this year. Like the budget, there's not a lot of new anything in the budget, and but the money that we're really keeping an eye on that is also going to kind of come up a year from now is the capital plan. So the city has been through issuing bonds, getting hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on complete streets projects and walking and biking projects that they've never had available before, and all those dollars don't have strings attached to them like a lot of the state and federal dollars do. So that's why you've probably seen, a lot of the concrete curbs going out on protected bike lanes and like things getting upgraded like a lot more quickly than we've seen in the past. And that's because of this this local capital program, which is outside of the city's annual budget process. So that's something that we're going to be working and building a campaign around, maintaining and expanding that funding because it's due to run out at the end of next year. So that's one thing that we're watching. But and in terms of like the scuttlebutt on the commissioner, we haven't heard anything about them interviewing anyone, and we've tried to offer some names of folks that we know nationally are pretty progressive and forward thinking folks. You may have seen if you watch the budget hearing, everyone loves Tom Carney, who's the interim commissioner, but I think we'd be concerned about him taking over in a permanent way because he's been at CDOT for 25 years and is very much kind of a company man, as it were. So not someone who we would look to bring kind of the transformational change that we know the agency needs. So there's kind of a not Tom Carney angle, but that's that's something that we're gonna need to keep an eye on as that goes forward. The other piece too is that we're also working on is and kind of understandably, but I guess a little bit of inside baseball, but like the mayor's office has its hands full at the moment with the migrant crisis, and Julie was talking about some of the other big policy initiatives that they've been prioritizing early on in the administration. So we're working kind of behind the scenes to try and elevate just generally the visibility of the transportation agenda within the mayor's office and making sure that his top folks are prioritizing all these different opportunities that we've been talking about to advance equitable and sustainable transportation. So all that stuff is kind of happening right now because we know, even if we do have a good commissioner, if we don't have the leadership coming from the mayor's office, it's hard for them to get things done. So that leadership piece is really key, and we'll definitely be watching out for that. But thanks for flagging that.
Anyone else or any thoughts in response, Ethan?
No, that was really helpful. The only other quick question is you guys mentioned that sort of arterial resurfacing, that when an arterial gets redone, that there's mandates for safe infrastructure that gets built into it by default. Do you know when that is supposed to kick in and like who's working on what those standards are going to be? Because I haven't heard anything since it passed like, at least like 6 to 8 months ago, right?
So the Complete Streets ordinance that said that the CDOT was going to develop new guidelines, they are developing those. someone like flashed a document at us. But we haven't taken a look at it yet. But that is something that's in the works, and we want to make sure that we get a look at and people are able to understand. But it hasn't been released just yet. But that ordinance, I believe it only impacts projects that have started development after July of this year. So it's nothing that's been built yet is going to be has been impacted by this new law, but it's stuff going forward. And so we'll start to see this, kind of to Robert's point. There's a couple of things that have been put into the hopper, and we're actually going to start to see them panning out. I think in the next like 6 to 12 months with changes on the ground. But that their issuing of those guidelines is going to be something in the weeds that we're going to need to watch out for and make sure that we're all happy with those, or we can twist our arms and force them to make it better.
Great. And then we have one final question, since we just have about a minute left, from Liz in the chat. Is anyone looking at a plan for Halstead besides the general better streets for buses? So I'm going to assume, that's kind of making Halstead safer for people taking transit, walking, biking. I haven't heard of any bike planning projects along Halstead, but I will flag on the far south side on South Halstead from 95th all the way south to Harvey, so past the southern border of the city. Pace is building out their Pace Pulse route there. So there'll be a couple of areas of bus priority on that stretch. And it is the highest ridership Pace route or bus line goes down Halstead. So that's something, but I don't think that's exactly what you were looking for, unfortunately.
The other issue with Halstead Street, I believe Chicago and Halstead is just west of the proposed casino. And so that's a concern, but I'm assuming you're really referring to what for colloquial used to be referred to Boys Town.
No, I mean, I think it's a corridor, a cross-town corridor. If you're going from Lakeview to Bridgeport, if you're going from Lakeview to Milwaukee, if you're going, to West Loop and, all sorts of places like that's really the only way that makes sense to go via bike. It's a death, Chicago and Halstead is already a death trap via bike. And it's also a major bus route, and the buses crawl when there's car traffic. So if that,
and also when I hear Halstead, I think of like I used to do a lot of work around 63rd in Halstead, so I would start to think about the south side of Halstead before I think about the north side.
Sure, but it connects us, right?
Right, and it's very different.
Yeah, the Halstead bus is certainly in the top, I'd say 8 routes for ridership in the city. So yeah, it's a really important stretch. But perhaps once the Better Streets for Buses plan is published, there'll be some support in there for more along Halstead. So,
and to just quickly piggyback off that too, like the Chicago cycling strategy, which came out this summer, had Halstead from Lakeview all the way down through Lincoln Park listed for some kind of upgraded bikeway planning. But every single staffer or, like aldermanic or CDOT person I've reached out to has absolutely no idea what that is referring to. They clearly have their eye on Halstead in multiple points if you go on the map and look at the corridors they've identified. But no one knows what that means.
And I think that, thank you, Ethan, for that, because that just highlights the kind of lack of interagency coordination I was kind of trying to get at as well earlier. The lack of comprehensive planning for buses and bikes is just really frustrating.
Yeah, I think there's been some upgrades on Jackson and Halstead, but that's on Jackson and not on Halstead.
Right, that's on Jackson. Yeah, I haven't heard of any plans for any upgrades on the actual Halstead or any section of Halstead.
And the cross section of the street just changes a ton as you go down it, and it's like an incredibly challenging street. We need to get rid of cars. That's the only thing that's going to work. It just needs to be bikes and buses.
Right, and then
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's sorry. This is the only thing that's going to work.
And then the whole UIC stretch too.
Yep.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah, the
Liz, so
saga
much.
continues on Halstead, unfortunately.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for your time and your passion and dedication and efforts. We'll make another plug that CTA budget action alert before Tuesday. Join us on November 28th at Revolution if you can. And we will see you hopefully there or then or at the next city advocacy call in January. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.